Probably a big granuloma. This is a precision drill, and I did this one free-handed. So you can also see already a papilla is missing here. It's interrupted the tissue. I'm working with an implant system provided by the office, but I collect the bone and you see the cavity of the cyst. And this hole, or palatal, is where I'm preparing for my implant, because I want to have a palatally positioned screw access hole. And at this moment, the buccal contour is still intact. So checking and double checking. Of course you can do this guided. And this is the final drill. We always under-prepare slightly the implant site. So you have to be careful that when you place actually the implant, there is always a danger for buccal drifting. So you have to think about that. How can we compensate that? And that's even so with guided surgery. And so be careful, push the implant during this stage against the palatal wall. That's important, in order not to end up to buckle. So bilateral can be placed quite precisely, but then the other drills, and especially the last drill and the bigger implant diameter, will push your implant buckling if you're not careful. This is the buccal pouch preparation. I did that also palatal. It's not in the video. And I also did another thing. I de-epithelialized the sulcus. But there's no epithelium pore on the inside of this socket. I'm using a punch on the palate just to make a circular mark. That circle is about the mesial distal diameter of the extraction socket, and I design now the wings around it, and I take the tissue out of the area with the help of a suture. The wings are de-epithelialized. You can try to do this in the mouth and rework the tissue outside the mouth. I like to pamper the donor zone with some collagen material. And here I'm using an intermediate abutment. Staying within the Axiom implant system, I would prefer to use an Axiom TL tissue level with a color of 2.5. So that means we are creating a prosthetic platform about halfway into the biological width space. What I did here, I'm pulling one of the wings into the palatal pouch. I secure this with a suture. I have the bone collected from the drills mixed. In this case we use Ceramon. And I hike in that mix of biomaterial and autogenous bone. And you will see me, I was able to pack quite a big amount of material into the gap, because we also fill up the buccal cavity of the cyst. Then with that same tunneling technique, as I showed you earlier, we can now pick up the tip of the buccal wing and pull it into the buccal pouch. This will increase the volume over here, buckling. So we are over contouring in order to anticipate the buccal bone loss. And you will see now that sometimes it's a bit hard to have it sliding into place. And so I'm pulling over here, but I also like to push and to line up the epithelium of the graft in the central portion with the epithelium of the de-epithelialized socket. That's over here. And so you create a seal. So that's also very good from a biological point of view, to keep the blood clot stable, the grafting material stable, to keep the bacteria out. And you can see here, I'm over contouring with that buccal wing quite a lot the buccal contour. contour. Wound healing should always be optimized by stabilization, and that's done with monofilament sutures in this case. Look at the buccal contour, how bulky that was. Now, okay, so this was the starting point. We waited 4 months, then just with a little bunch, my friend took off the cover screw here, and now he has a prosthetic platform where he can work with a professional to create in the sick tissue an emergence profile. So then the work is, surgically speaking, done. The tissue is matured. After 4 months it's considered matured. The buccal contour is perfectly back to normal after the shrinkage. And now we can make on this prosthetic platform the final restoration, which is done by Dr. Pelikanos in Greece. You see here the end result. And the beauty of this case is also we didn't make any incisions. It's just done through the pouch under the tissue, and we did everything in one step. We waited, submerging the implant, and then we have an end result with symmetry, good aesthetics, and those scars. That's also important. And so this is the butterfly grafting technique, compensating for buccal bone loss, respecting the tissues. The preserving one, you know, 5 ways to preserve the ridge. We talked about the one where we use the connective tissue to compensate bone loss. We can preserve when we leave a portion of the root in place. That cannot be done always, but when it is possible, it's not easy, but if you are able to extract the palatal portion of the root and keep these buccal shields, therefore it's called the socket shield, we can keep the buccal protection. The buccal block supply will keep the bundle bone in place. We can graft here, and we have now a situation in which it becomes a little bit less invasive for the patient, because I don't need to go to do that big graft on the palate as you saw in the video anymore. So this is probably also well known here in Vietnam, and these results are quite stable over time. So technically speaking, it's not easy. You need special drills. I have a kit for that, and not every tooth is a good candidate to do that. And you can run into troubles, but also here you see the root, that is the dark line of the X-ray. The grafting, the implant is placed in the middle, and we preserve the buccal contour, especially on a tooth like a canine or a central incisor. It can make really a big difference. Most frequently in my clinical practice, I use both. I use to rebuild on soft tissue level and on bone level, maybe at the same time, the ridge. And I always over contour, and we always have some shrinkage. So our toolbox is actually quite well equipped. We have the tools. We will see that also in the next lecture. There are beautiful materials there out on the market. We have nice membranes. A membrane, from my humble point of view, needs fixation. But it's not only to fixate the membrane to the bone. It's also to keep the grafting material under the membrane in a stable position. If you don't work with fixation, a bulky shape of a graft can be easily dispatched by an ice pack that the patient, after the surgery, pushes against the lip. And then your grafting material will be somewhere in the vestibulum and not in front of the implant you just placed there. So the bone tags are important also on resorbable membranes. And these are our tools. To cover volume, you need flap mobilization, of course. That is a key. And what I've been telling about the buccal bone loss has been documented very well in the literature. You see, the buccal part is over here, and there's always a loss of buccal bone. So this is what you get. And so it's a fair thing to say we have to make a plan because we know what's going to happen. The volume loss is crestal and buccally, so we are losing the volume over here. Just as a small introduction to the lecture of Hassan, I will tell you how I see GBR. There's horizontal GBR and vertical GBR. What's the most difficult one? The vertical. And why is that more advanced? Well, it's all hidden in the biology, so you can have easy cases like the one here. If the bone is still there, you can place the implant. Here we have a bone defect, but it's well protected with walls. The distance is not so big. Stem cells out of the spongious bone, when the blood clot formation will happen here, they don't have to travel a long distance. The whole area is well protected. So that's an easy defect in my book. It becomes more difficult. So it's an easy defect because of this. Short distance, small volume, protective walls. It's a space maintaining defect. You hardly need a membrane to get away with a defect like that. Here it's a more difficult ball game. The stem cells, they are here. They have to travel a longer distance. We need a grafting material. We need a membrane, a solid membrane. We also need fixation for the reason I just mentioned. So these bone tags are very important. So to stabilize the grafting material, we have to wait longer. And therefore the barrier has to be a longer lasting barrier. So a resorbable membrane is not good anymore for a case like this, and I'm sure Hassan will come back on this. And we have beautiful options nowadays because we can do predictable GBR in extreme situations. And I was asked to speak by my friends Massimo Simeon, Professor Massimo Simeon and Professor Zucchelli about what are the limits of bone regeneration from my point of view. Well, and I did that on the IAO meeting, which is actually going on right now in Munich, in Germany. So last year it was in Milan. I was talking on this topic. Bone can be regenerated on bone, and bone can be regenerated on titanium. Horizontal and vertical. Vertical is the most difficult one. With all the big names here. Dr. Jovanovic is in that list as well, together with Daniel Boozer and Christo Darlin. Professor Simeon, good friend, Istvan Urban, he's doing amazing things, I would say. And also in Italy we have Marco Ronda and Luca De Stavolo, very skillful clinicians specializing in this. You sure know them all. And the GBR works with principles. We need osteogenetic stem cells for new bone formation, so we need a blood clot that the cells can travel through and bring in the defect area. We need osteoconduction and induction. and membrane sheltered and space maintaining defect area. And wound stability. Also that last factor is very important. These are the 4 key principles from my point of view. And we have been living exciting moments because we have a lot of new tools, and you see some examples of this. And so vertical regeneration is made a little bit more user-friendly. So again, what are the limits? Well, we have to stay in an anatomical envelope. There are barriers, like the sinus, the nerves, but also the exposed root surface. And that's why I was happy to see that was pointed out by Lorenzo yesterday. The presence of a root surface, it's not a good indication if you want to regenerate new bone directly against the root, because you can get external resorption or ankylosis. Of course, there are the general contraindications which are not so important here. And this is what we sometimes can do. You have here a big defect created by a stupid kind of surgery done on a premolar after trauma. This lady went to the dentist. The dentist took out the premolar. He placed a tissue level implant that was not stable. So he went deeper and deeper and deeper till he hit the bottom of the sinus. And he did not even suture it. It was 12 minutes, the whole thing, extraction and surgery. And you see, the wound was open, there was food infection, inflammation, so I had to take out both the implant and the premolar, because that bone was completely lost against that root. So you can imagine how big the defect was, and that's what you see here on this small video. So 17 millimeters. I did this a long time ago, so we were still using bone blocks, but that's just to give you an idea how invasive in the past that type of surgery was. And we had to go to a donor site, get a lot of autogenous bone, which is good for induction. And I use a non-resorbable membrane. Make the perforation, so I have bleeding in the defect area, fixation of the bone block, and I packed a lot of autogenous bone taken from the donor site behind that block against the membrane. So it was like having a container. And then I flipped over the membrane after applying, and that's the layering technique we like to advocate, a superficial layer. In this case it was bios, but it could be Cerabone as well. And then you flip over the membrane and you do the fixation. So you have a stable, packed graft. Membranes, non-resorbable membranes should not touch the teeth, like was said yesterday. And then you need a huge flap mobilization. And my friend Istvan Erbo would say flap mobilization is good when you can walk out the room with the flap in your hands. So then healing. The bigger the defect, the longer the healing period. Up to 1 year sometimes can be enough. If a defect is smaller, we can go in quicker. Here you see no keratinized tissue present. Again, we have here a huge mucogingival defect. I created that with that flap mobilization you saw in the video. So there's something else to fix here. Implants are not in. Fixation screw and the membrane, they still have to come out. And this is what I did in this surgery. At that time, I was working with an implant system with a flat-to-flat connection. I know I would like to have a papilla back in place. So therefore, I try to go as coronal as possible with my bone regeneration. So my implants will be placed under the bone level because the CE is positioned higher, more apically than the level of the newly formed bone. So in simple words, there would be an inter-implant peak present. Nice result of my regeneration, because I went from here through vertical defect with bone above my reference line, and then you see the matured bone and the implants. So these implants were placed in 80% of bone that was not there before. So I was impressed by what was possible at these days, but I did not have the right hardware yet. There were implants that needed to be uncovered. I waited 4 months for some more solid stability through osseointegration, and then I make a flap, placing a pedicle from the palate to the buccal. But this is a different variation because you see these two little circles. The circles were there. It's a pedicle. They were there to be placed around healing abutments, which I modified myself and sterilized them in order to snap these holes on these narrow abutments. Why did I make them narrower? Well, if you remove 0.5 millimeter on both sides, you have 1 millimeter or more tissue in between. That's always useful, I thought. And then it comes down on suturing and pampering the donor side. So this is a partial thickness flap. This is the buccal area. So buccally, I repositioned keratinized tissue, and I call this a traction seal. The cheek was pulling on ridge level. There was no vestibulum anymore. With this, I bring back a barrier because this will be attached to the bone. And this is the donor side on the palate. So that heals. And this was my starting point. But with hardware, which was not very optimal to keep that bone. And I will show you what happened. So I had to finish this place. This girl wanted to marry, so she was pushing me a little bit. I used some provisionals and I got the right shape into the soft tissue, which was now thick enough. At that time we had already some metal-free components on the replay system of Noble Biocare. You see the tri-lobes, and the components were too bulky. So I could not keep enough distance between the bone, the peak, and these components. I had a good clinical result. You see the restorations, they go in place. But on bone level, I did quite a lot of work to get my vertical bone level back. You see the dotted line was my starting point. But to be honest, I lost my interdental bony peak, and also, what you can see, on the side of every implant, medially and distally, I lose the bone because it moves away from a flat to flat connection. And we have this understanding now, but at that time, our hardware was not up to date. The shape of this whole restoration was too much, from my humble point of view, a copy of a natural tooth. And we can be more clever now. Smaller implants, platform shifting, concave emergence profile, creating more space for tissue. Something that looks like this if I draw it in this X-ray, okay? And again, this was a long treatment, so I'm against these fast post-extraction cases done very fast and using the word, it's non-invasive, the tooth goes out, the implant goes in, and that's it. Very often you see the biggest mistakes made in the smallest amount of time. So, other conclusions are that soft tissue management is critical. You saw how difficult that flat buccally position was to bring back thick keratinized tissue in place. The crestal bone is suffering from a space problem and suffering from a micro gap. Inter-implant peak is problematic. So even if we can rebuild the peak, will it stay there? I don't think so. And the bottleneck emergence profile is something, the concavities, I really was charmed by this. So the cases I do now, these are G2 premolars, put on a more moderate implant system. These are Axiom bone level implants. You see the bone grows back on top of the shoulder and the crestal bone is stable. We have more space between the concave abutments. We have a positioning of the interfaces which is well in place. So we have an interface between the bone and the implant neck, the connection. There's no gap, so it's a seal. And also, you see the type base I use brings the restoration 2 millimeters away from the bone where we start with the interface between titanium and zirconia. So we are positioning these interfaces in a space which is called the biologic waist, which is about 4 millimeters in height. And buccally we need 2 millimeters of traction seal, but you can see this X-ray, crestal bone stability. All these cases, they have enhanced soft tissue. So this is already a little bit how we started to understand how important a connection really is for an implant system. Is it the way the connection is made? 12 degrees, 6 plus 6. It's activated, it's precision. A cone goes into the cone. It's very difficult to produce, and there is a mismatch between the abutment and the cone in the implant. And the last 5 Newton or so activates the connection. In order to do that, you don't need the precision on the inside here, as I just explained, but you also need a very strong and rigid implant neck. And this is why Antogir is using grade 5 titanium. If you use anything less, like grade 4 in this case, this is also implants which we used to use in the past. It's Nobel Active. They have 12 degrees on both sides, so it's a 24-degree conical connection. And the amount of titanium around the connection is very tiny. So the neck is not rigid, grade 4, wide conical connection, and therefore you see already the crestal bone is moving away because there's movement and there's a gap. And so that means not any conical connection is able to get that seal. And you see here, this is what we tested in Salange. If you push a 24-degree conical connection on an implant like I just mentioned, to the left, a gap is opening up at the right. So it's not stable, it's moving around, the bone will move away, and that's what you see also on this animation. So the flat to flat is opening on the left, but if you look well, also the conical connection, which is wide and the neck is thin, is having the same gap. So that means a conical connection, they are not, every conical connection is not the same, because of what you see here in this drawing. Wide connection, thin neck, narrow connection, 12 degree, thick neck, grade 5 titanium, strong. It's even slightly more rigid than rock solid, they told me, but it's almost a double if you compare it to grade 4. They put vanadium into the titanium alloy, and therefore the connection and the implant neck, if we talk about the zero bone loss, our hardware part, so we have 3 components in this circle: the hardware, the surgical part, and the biological part. In the hardware part, definitely the connection and the implant neck, they have a very important role. Also, what we already said, the bone stability is also related to the soft tissue thickness. That is the arrow you see on the right hand side. It's very important as well. And then there is a surgical part. In the surgical part you see the word friction control over here. I will talk about that later, because if you have too much friction during a surgeon, you regenerate heat. Heat can create necrosis. But thick tissue is important to host the biological waste that needs a space of approximately 3.5 millimeter. If that space is not there, the body will take it from the bone. Now the timing. What can we do? We can try to make the tissue thick during implant placement. I have here just a small case to show you quickly. A bridge with some problems, localized probing, 10 millimeter in one place. This was the wife of a dental technician. She was in pain. Her dentist could not find anything wrong with this bridge. But if you have a localized probing like this, what can be the reason? Well, we agree you have to think about a fracture, right? It's not maybe an endodontic problem, but very often you see root fracture like this. And with high magnification photography, you can understand that the bacteria in this crack can go deep, proliferate, and the body has no defense system inside the crack. So this is why the bacteria are organizing the biggest parties, and the periodontal ligament is moving away. And this is where we have the probing. You can see that on this high magnification. And therefore, there's only one thing to do: extract the tooth. I did primary closure. I waited 6 weeks, so it's just done with a plug graft, epithelium and connective tissue to seal the area after cleaning. And then there was enough bone to place 2 implants. I actually did this with after some treatment planning. And the treatment planning was done in an old school way with a wax up. You can do this now also with a digital workflow, but you can see that if you work carefully and if you look at the planning, some volume is missing here. And we have to make a plan to bring this back in the area. And this is what was shown also yesterday. We can do this sometimes at time of surgery and implant placement. So you see the buccal concavity. We have to convert this into convexity in order to get the root mimetics back in place. And I chose for the subepithelium connective tissue graft done during implant placement. I used the wax up to make a drill guide. Flapless surgery is always very difficult. It's not maybe the best option for beginners, although we have a lot of digital tools now. And I placed my implants. That's an Axiom for the premolar 3.4. And I used to do the last couple of turns by hand. look from this side, from the other side. So this is the devitalizing of the crestal portion. I have small healing abutments, so I use that as a framework for my suturing also. And I put the graft against the healing abutments. The graft needs fixation, so you see a horizontal mattress suture. My graft is stable, it's a connective tissue graft. And now I suture the partial thickness flap over this connective tissue. And so it takes me longer than placing the implants, but it's very useful. And you see here the X-ray. Why is it useful? Because with this amount of tissue, which is maybe 2 millimeters, the concavity becomes a convexity. I have tissue where I can play with. You create the bulk, you can, with a provisional, crestal bone level stable, on top of the shoulders of the implants, and a nice volume. So this was my wax up, and this was what I got. And you see, same angle, same inclination, more volume. And then, what do? We have now the thick tissue, we have the bulk. Well, there are actually two ways. I'm gonna prepare with a provisional and emergence profile in this thick tissue. That's stable now, that's ready. But you could also pre-plan an abutment, which you place in this situation at time of surgery. And these abutments are now also available under the name heel-fit abutments. And so they will be also on the market here in Vietnam, I think. But in the end of the day, what you want to have is what you see in this slide. Emergence profiles. The test drive is done. So we have flat emergence profile, and we can see how different this is starting to look from what I showed previously. It's not a one-to-one copy of a tooth anymore. And we go up straight with a tie base, and then we go wide in the area where the tissue is stronger, the keratinized tissue. So my restorations, they look a little bit like pontics on a titanium stick. We copy and paste this. You can do this digitally. This is what the technician, the husband of the patient, made. This is glazing. He did not do any hand polishing, so that's why the restorations look a little bit too artificial, but the volume is back in place and the results are sort of stable. Sort of stable because what happened is that when this patient came back for delivery, one of the temporaries was moving, and it was this one. So when I place the restorations, I make an X-ray, and you see a moving temporary has a gap. That gap on a bone level implant creates that bone loss over here. The other implant has the bone on top of the shoulder. So you see, we are going very deep into these details, but also these little things, they are important. So we don't want to have micro gaps on bone level implants. So this is something where we can learn from. And for the same reason, I'm very careful if I see that the restoration comes back completely polished. Also the part that goes into the connection. If the technician does so, he polishes away the precision of the connection, which cannot be activated properly anymore. And so all these details in which, it's not a big thing, but we are losing just because of that stupid detail, a millimeter or so of crestal bone. And it does not come back. This is why I showed you an X-ray 1 year later. Let's jump in the last 7-8 minutes to the implant papilla. Also, why was there a fracture of this tooth? Well, you see the lady is in her 50s. The tip of the canine, she's a Bruxer, is gone. And by an occlusal check, in red you see the lateral movements. The canine guidance became more like a group function, and that's why the premolar was working a little bit too much in the lateral movements. So we have now, what I'm doing here, I asked the technician to make an Emax cusp to place preplus on top of the canine of this wife, and I'm etching it on my finger and here I'm cementing it. So this is just to go a little bit deeper into the details. Emax is a very friendly material. It has some abrasion. It's closer to dentin than zirconia, which is very hard, and it can be adhesively cemented. So I brought back the canine guidance. As I promised, the implant papilla is always underperforming. This is the inter-implant papilla tissue height. So this is not very much. We know we can have 5, 6, 7 millimeters if we are lucky, but 3.5 as an average. This is out of a paper of the Salama brothers. It's not much. A Pontic is performing better. And so, if you have a case like this, an anterior case, in which a patient comes, typical Italian lady, failing bridge, she wants all the interdental spaces filled with big tissue. The ideal incisor line is the dotted line, so I have a very difficult starting point on a very demanding patient. So therefore, sometimes it's wise to go in the opposite way. You see a huge amount of bone loss. Of course, this can be reconstructed, but can we get all these missing papilla back in place? Well, on a good day, I can get maybe 2 out of 4, but it's not very predictable, and this patient will create a lot of trouble. So I go in the opposite way. I remove bone. I have just enough bone to place 2 10mm implants. I do now my horizontal augmentation, much easier, much faster, with a horizontal augmentation and a resorbable membrane. I have now 2 implants in the center and 2 Pontic sites. So I went in this case for the prosthetic shortcut. You see, it's still old flat-to-flat implants, but with skillful work, especially here in this area, to hide the transition, the vertical transition, because the horizontal transition between pink and pink is above the smile line that is engineered in the cutback on the bone I did. We get the ideal end result. Sometimes this can be smarter than trying to do all your best in a very invasive way with a high risk. So this is something to consider. You see how nicely the technician was able to hide this transition line. And it's just enough to bring in a floss from here. Go to here, go to there. And so this was stable in time. And my technician veneers the zirconia and works on the feldspatic porcelain, creating surface texture. Surface texture, as a photographer, I can tell you, brings very natural light reflection. This is why these teeth look so beautiful. If you go monolithic and everything is flat like in the previous case, it's not the same. So that is the artwork of the lab, and this is what you see also when you make a frontal picture. And also the horizontal regeneration was very helpful to create a parabolic runway for the lip during the smile dynamics. So this is how we can bypass the papilla problem. But if you have to place multiple implants here and try to create a papilla, you will have a hard time. It's not easy. It's not a Monday morning case when we are. So this is how I try to summarize a little bit in my introduction. What are the difficulties? What is the philosophy? How we can work on bone level? The work we do on the bone should go hand in hand with our soft tissue challenge, I would say. We've seen we can do a lot also with soft tissue. Probably soft tissue over time is more stable than bone. And so why don't use this in almost all the problematic cases? So here we have pink porcelain, and we avoid the problem of the interdental peak supporting it, an impossible papilla. Okay, I think this is a good moment. Still have 1 minute left, but I think it's a good moment to stop here with the lecture. And we are going into the coffee break time, and we are looking forward to see what can we do with some of the new tools on bone level in the next lecture. I thank you for your kind attention, and we will be back here after the coffee break. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Insightful presentation.